Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday night education session. I'm really happy to see the number of live attendees that we have this week. It means a lot. So thank you for taking some time out of your night. And if you're watching the replay, thank you for taking your time out of whatever time of day it is. This week, we are going to be getting into nutrition and the macronutrients. So it's going to be a little bit of basic information. As these sessions progress, I want to build upon them. So it probably won't be the full hour this week, but we are going to get into the 3 different types of macronutrients. We're going to touch on alcohol, but not a ton, and get into why you guys are eating the macros that you are for generic situations. Do keep in mind that, everyone is individual. Your metabolism, your lifestyle, how you're moving, your training program, your goals, everything is different. So your macros are tailored to you. And when you do check in with your LadyTheFUp coach, we make changes based on what you need and the metabolic adaptations that you've gone through over the past week, over the past month, over the past 6 months. We want to push and pull with macros so that eventually you're able to eat more food and still keep a better body composition. So typically when women start with us at LadyTheFUp, we either have 2 cases for them. Either we get them around maintenance calories and then start to decrease, or they come to us and say, hey, I've been eating 1,200 calories for the past 2 years, and that's when they need a reverse diet at the start. So for the generic person who has not been under eating for years, we want to figure out what their total daily energy expenditure is. Now, the short form for that is TDEE. And within your TDEE, we take into a couple factors into play. So first of all is your age, your height, and your weight. So this is going to give us a generic kind of equation to start with as to how many calories you're roughly going to be burning in a day, known as your basal metabolic rate, or your BMR. So that is if you were to lay in bed and do absolutely nothing, eat nothing, that's approximately how many calories you would burn. And then we have to take into account your activity level. Are you someone who is a shift worker who's on your feet for 12 hours a day? Are you sitting at a desk from 9 to 5? The non-energy activity thermogenesis, so NEAT, your NEAT throughout the day, your non-exercise activity really plays a role in how much food you should be eating as well. So I have clients that are massage therapists and nurses and paramedics. They're on their feet all day. They're very active. And I have some women who work desk jobs for 10 to 12 hours and they barely get up from sitting down day to day. So they're going to be burning less calories overall. What else do I have on here? Oh, Amira, are you able to see me now? I hope. I'm also just going to check Facebook to make sure that we are connected here. Give me 1 second, guys, because there's typically a delay on that side. Just want to make sure we are live there too. Facebook people, if you have any questions ever, feel free to comment below, and I will hop back and forth between the tabs to see if there are any questions. So when we are predicting how many calories you guys are burning, it really is just our best guess when you start with us. The first 4 weeks of coaching are really about learning your metabolism, how you responded to the first week. Okay, we're going to make a couple tweaks. How you responded to the second week. Should we increase? Should we decrease? Are you more active than we thought? So within your total daily energy expenditure, we also take into account giving you the resistance training and giving you the cardio. So these are part of your output where we want to find the balance of calories in, calories out. So the more calories we eat compared to the calories that we burn, if you're in a caloric surplus, your body is going to put on weight. It might be muscle, it might be fat. If you're in a calorie deficit, meaning you are eating less calories than you burn in a day, you are going to lose weight. And when you lose weight, as much as we would all love to in a perfect world have it be all fat, it is very, very rarely all fat. We do lose a little little bit of muscle, but there are specific macro splits that we can implement at the same time to keep that muscle mass higher and even increase the amount of muscle mass as we are leaning out through resistance training. But those principles we covered last week. How many calories am I burning without doing anything? If you go into Google and type in TDEE calculator or anything like that, it can give you an approximate estimate based on the formulas that are out there. The formulas that are out there are really only accurate for about 50% of people. And then you have 25% that fall on the higher end and 25% that fall on the lower end, which is why they're guesstimates for us as coaches when we start with you. And then we manipulate based on what we want to do with your body overall. And we go from there. So just Google total daily energy expenditure calculator and see what pops up. It is going to ask you if you're like sedentary, if you're lightly active, if you're moderately active, if you're very active. Be realistic and honest with yourself. If you are working out for 1 hour, 3 to 5 days a week, that's moderate. That is not vigorous. Vigorous are the athletes or those that are training for like triathlons or marathons, and they're doing anywhere from an hour to 2.5, 3 hours of physical activity in a day. Or if you're working a really intensive manual labor job, you would be very active, but don't figure it out and be like, yes, I am a very active person. And when it tells you you're burning 2,100 calories, but you're eating 1,800 and you're not seeing rapid fat loss or fat loss at a steady rate, it could be that your metabolic rate is lower. Other things that lower metabolic rate is poor sleep, poor recovery, emotional stress, and eating foods that you negatively react to, which is going to be a whole nother episode on its own. So let's get into the different macros. So there are 3 main macronutrient categories. You've got your protein, you've got your carbs, and you've got your fats. So typically when we are giving protein or when we're giving macros, it's protein first and then carbs and then fats. So if you're new to reading macros, keep that in mind. The protein amount that we give out is going to vary based on your individual needs. If you are a vegetarian or if you are a vegan, we're going to put you a lot lower on the ideal range of protein to consume for body recomposition, aka adding muscle at the same time as losing fat, because you don't have those pure protein sources like meat, like eggs. So you need to get them more from legumes and nuts and seeds that have higher carbohydrates and higher fats, but they do have some protein. So if you are a vegetarian or if you are a vegan, always start by planning your macros and hitting your protein first, and then add your carbs and your fats around that so that you're not struggling to be like, oh my God, I have 30 grams of protein to hit for the day. What am I doing? So vegans and vegetarians aside, if you are someone who consumes either meat or fish or eggs, we suggest at least 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you would be wanting to eat ideally at least 150 grams. There are some people out there, I have clients that reach out to me, they're like, I am so sick of meat, I can't do it anymore. And then sure, we can lower it a little bit. The scientific research shows us in kilograms, okay? So if you want to know your weight in kilograms, again, open Google, go pounds to kilograms, figure out what your kilogram weight is. But for the research out there, it shows a minimum of 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. So that is on the very, very low end, just to kind of function day to day. This is not if you're an athlete. This is not if you're training, not if you're active. 0.8 grams is to keep you feeling good and to keep your body operating at a sufficient level every single day. Same for men? Yes, same for men. Protein, there's been a ton of studies where no, it's not bad for your kidneys. That was a study that was done in like the late 90s, and it was 1, maybe 2 of them that have been disproven since. So higher protein, it's not bad for the kidneys. There's nothing wrong with it. And research shows that if you want to build muscle in an ideal ratio, you should be consuming 2.2 grams per kilogram all the way up to 4.4 grams per kilogram. So for me, I weigh, I don't know, I'm guessing like somewhere between 135 and 140 pounds right now. For that 4.4 kilograms, for me personally, I would have to be eating somewhere around 250 to 300 grams of protein a day. I love meat, so I do stick on the higher end of the protein range, where typically I'll consume somewhere between 200 and 220 grams in a day. If I'm not hungry, I always make sure to hit my minimum of 140, 150 grams, but I am not currently tracking macros. So if your coach is giving you macros, stick to the macros plus minus 5 grams of whatever they have given you. But research shows that you can eat up to 4.4 grams per kilogram without adding on additional fat mass to your body. So that means you can be in a surplus slightly of just protein, and you can still put on muscle and add lean body mass without added fat going on. Multiplied by total body weight or of lean body weight. So this is total body weight that we're talking about. You can use lean body mass, but for efficient weight loss, especially if you are on the either obese or overweight side, you want to have more protein rather than being short, because you do need to support your body with the higher weight. So what does protein do in the body? I want you to think of everything inside you right now, okay? Your neurotransmitters that are making you feel good, your signals that are telling me to talk right now, moving my hands, my hair, my skin, my nails, my teeth, my muscles, my bones. Every single cell in your body is made of protein. And with protein, there are a whole bunch of chains that get broken down into amino acids. So amino acids are the broken down form of protein. There are 20, some textbooks say 21 amino acids out there. And out of those, there are 9 that we cannot make within our body. So if we go days, weeks, months without getting these necessary amino acids from the foods that we eat, we're not going to feel good. Our body is essentially missing ingredients for a recipe, and it's not going to be able to produce the energy that you would have day to day. It's not able to put you in a good mood. Protein is so important for mental health, for mental energy, for dopamine and serotonin production, for our overall well-being. And with this, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I saw a question. I will come back to this. Red meat, do they increase the risk of cancer? Not within reasonable quantities. So if you have like 1 steak a day, that's totally fine. If it's grass-fed, if it's organic, ideally that's what we want to focus on. But if you're having like bacon for breakfast and sausages for lunch and burgers for dinner, that could be where your cholesterol starts to increase. Your physician will say, start cutting back on the red meat. Those of you who do have cholesterol issues that run in the family, maybe you want to limit your red meat consumption to like 1 or 2 times a week. Focus on leaner proteins such as chicken, turkey, fish, stuff like that. So getting back on track with the amino acids, 9 of them we cannot make from food. So if we don't get them, that's when we're going to feel really, really shitty. So a lot of you, if you think back to before you started with LadyTheFUp, I'm going to guarantee for about 80% of you, you were not consuming enough protein in the day. And that's why you felt so tired and so lethargic all the time. So we introduced these essential amino acids that your body was lacking. And all of a sudden, boom, you're more awake, you're more alert, you're feeling better. And these amino acids are going to start turning on everything in the body that needs those ingredients for the recipes. Things like muscle growth, things like hair growth, nail growth, healthy skin, all of this requires amino acids. From a muscle building standpoint as well, 9 of the amino acids are essential, and 3 of those 9 are known as the branched chain amino acids. So they're isoleucine, leucine, and valine. You don't need to know that. But these 3 branched chain amino acids are responsible for muscle protein synthesis. So these are the 3 that when we consume them in sufficient quantities in our body, flips on the switch to tell our body, okay, now it's time to start building and repairing muscle. So when you are resistance training and you're trying to change your body composition, it's very important to ensure that you have sufficient branched chain amino acids. But this isn't where I want you to reach for a BCAA supplement or an EAA supplement. If you are consuming the protein that your coach gives you, whether that's 80 grams, 100 grams, 120 grams, 150 grams, 200 grams, whatever it is that your coach is assigning you, you are very likely consuming the sufficient amino acids that you need just through your diet, and you don't need external supplementation. The one exception here could be vegans or vegetarians, again, because plant-based sources are not complete protein sources. So complete protein sources means they have all 9 of the essential amino acids. Incomplete means they don't have all of them, might have 8, might have 7, might have 2. So with vegans, one of the only sources that you can get a complete protein with is pumpkin seeds. And that's often why if you start with us, you'll see in your meal plan that we put in a pumpkin seed protein powder to help ensure that you get all of those branched chain amino acids, the essential amino acids, and then the rest of your protein comes from whole foods, plant-based things, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, broccoli, things like that. Let me just check Facebook to catch up on the questions here. Grab a quick drink. Does anyone have questions? You're welcome to type them into the chat. No, not yet. Awesome. Okay. So that is protein in a nutshell, your branched chain amino acids, your essential amino acids. With protein, every gram has 4 calories. Okay. So 1 gram of protein equals 4 grams of, 1 gram of protein equals 4 calories. And then carbs are the same. Carbs are 4 calories per gram, and fats are 9 calories per gram. So if you have 100 grams of pure protein, 400 calories. 100 grams of pure carbs, 400 calories. 100 grams of pure fats, 900 calories. But we'll get into carbs and fats in a little bit. Protein is also more beneficial because it has the highest thermic effect of food. So when we consume food and we put it into our digestive system, our body has to burn calories to break it down, to unfold it, and send it where it needs to go in the body. So protein, let's say, again, you're eating 100 calories worth of protein, roughly 30% of that, so 30 of the 100 calories is just used by your body to break down the food and then turn it into the amino acids from its complex chains. It kind of unfolds it into the individuals and sends it off to the body wherever it needs to go to be utilized. With the thermic effect of food, it's because protein are really, really complex chains that your body has to break down. They take longer to digest and unfold as well, which as a benefit means that we get to feel fuller for longer. So for those of you who, if you recall back to your first couple of weeks starting with LadyTheFUp, you're like, oh my God, I'm so full. Yes, it's from eating the whole foods, but it's also from introducing the sufficient amount of protein that you need to consume in a day. Is meat easily digestible? This is a very individualized answer, and it also depends on your own unique food reaction. So I personally react to pork and beef, but I can have chicken, I can have turkey. There are some shellfish I can have, there are some shellfish I can't have. So if your body does not have a negative reaction to it, it should be able to digest without an issue, depending on the serving size. If you're having like 100, 150 grams of steak, shouldn't be an issue. If you're not someone who ate a ton of meat previously that is now going to a high meat, high protein diet, there is going to be a transition time because your body never had to produce the digestive enzymes to break it down sufficiently. So that's where maybe a digestive enzyme could be beneficial, but definitely talk to your coach before throwing one in. So protein keeps us fuller. It burns more calories being digested, and it is responsible for everything in our body to grow and repair sufficiently. In terms of protein timing, in a fat loss perspective, it's not a huge deal when you want to eat them. From a muscle growth perspective, though, timing gets a little bit more important. So you want to have 20 to 40 grams of protein, ideally containing those branched chain amino acids. So if it's meat or if it's eggs, it's not a problem. You don't have to worry about it. If you're unsure of your other sources, you can Google what is the amino acid profile. That's what it's known as, amino acid profile of a specific food. And then you can kind of see, are the top 3 branched chain amino acids there? Should I look for another food? Should I combine? That's also why if you look at vegan protein powders, oftentimes they'll have multiple varieties of plant-based protein sources so that you get that complete protein profile with all of the branched chain amino acids and essential amino acids that you need. Yeah, so I forgot where I was again. Sorry, guys. It's been a really long day. I think that's it. Let's move on from protein into carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are our fruits, our grains, our vegetables, any type of sugars. Those are all going to be carbs. Carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram as well. It doesn't matter if it's a complex carb like a pasta, a grain, vegetables, whatever that is compared to sugar, they all have 4 calories per gram, no matter what the structure of the carbohydrate is. That being said, if you go for a more complex carbohydrate, such as vegetables, sweet potato, chickpeas, anything with grains, that requires more energy for the body to break down rather than the simple sugars, which your body doesn't have to break down. It just takes it up into the bloodstream and starts to use it right away. So with carbohydrates, fiber is also one of them. So although fiber doesn't have 4 calories per gram, it still has some calories. This is where I'm not a fan of nutritional labeling in North America, because with fiber, they don't have to report calories on it. So even though, depending on the type of fiber, it can be 1 to like 3.2 calories, something like that. They can just say, nope, it has 0 calories. So those of you who have ever been keto before, if you're focusing on your fiber and trying to hit your fiber content without going over your specific range of carbs, your net carbs, you should factor in the fact that fiber has calories. Touching on the difference of net carbs to total carbs, at LadyTheFUp, Hammer Fitness, Man the F Up, if you're working with any of our coaches, we always track total carbs. So if you're eating 120 carbs in the day, your 25 grams of fiber is included in that 120. If you are keto, you would typically track net carbs, which means your total carbs minus fiber for the day, to keep you under the 65 grams roughly, which is the keto threshold to keep you in ketosis. It can vary from 50 to 70 grams from person to person, but that is generally the threshold where below that, your body no longer has enough energy coming in from carbohydrates and has to switch over to ketones, which is essentially your body burning fat for fuel. It's not any more beneficial than just consuming the carbs and staying in an overall calorie deficit. Gonna pop over to Facebook one more time, check for questions. All right, we are still good. Does anyone have any questions on Crowdcast here? Nope, not yet. Okay. So with keto, do you need more fat? Not necessarily. So in ketosis is when your body enters the state of burning ketones for fuel. It takes fat from your body, sends it to the liver, and the liver is the thing that cranks out the ketones, which is your body's alternate fuel source. But you don't need to have higher, you don't need to have higher fats necessarily. It's however you are able to stay in that carbohydrate deficit of 65 grams or less. That being said, if you are in a deficit and you are not getting enough carbohydrates, AKA you're in ketosis, one of the body's quickest things to do is to strip alanine, which is one of the 20 amino acids, from your muscles to use for fuel. And alanine is one of the things that gives your muscles the structure and the size. So if you'll see a lot of people that are in keto that don't look great, even though they work out all the time, because they're not feeding their body sufficient protein. They're likely going for the processed keto stuff. It's like, woohoo, I can have bacon all the time. Bring on the butter. I don't advise that. But if they are in that state, it's likely because their body's not getting sufficient protein for the amount of energy that they're burning. And their body's actually burning muscle and fat for fuel, which we don't want at LadyTheFUp, which is why for some of you, if you've ever done our 60-day challenge, if we peak you, sometimes your carbs do go below that 70 grams, but we push your protein higher to make sure that our body is getting most of its fuel from fat stores rather than your muscles. And if we do ever put a client into ketosis, it's transitioned properly. It is a temporary phase, and then you're transitioned out properly as well. Can fiber make you bloated? It totally can, depending on the type. So there are many different types of fiber out there. Sometimes fiber is in just naturally occurring food. So beans, legumes, berries are really high, oatmeal, those types of foods. It might not be the fiber making you bloated. It may be that you have a food reaction to a specific food. But if you're someone who is low on your fiber and your coach has recommended a psyllium husk supplement or something like that, you could be having an individual immune system reaction to the psyllium husk. Or you could be over consuming fiber. So for women, somewhere between like 25 and 40 grams is an ideal spot for fiber consumption for us. If we go over that 40 grams and it's very sudden and our digestive system hasn't gotten used to that, or if we've had like a ton of fiber, here's a story. 3 years ago, I guess, after my first ever show, I got into a bit of a long actual binging episode where it was 3 months or so. No one warned me about the reverse diet hunger. I was really upset. I kind of just stopped working with my coach and hid. And part of my binge one time was I ate an entire container of those fiber gummies, and it was the worst experience of my life. Didn't make me bloated, but I was sitting on the toilet for about 48 hours because everything was just going right through me. So fiber needs to be kept within moderation. It can potentially bloat you if you're not used to the amount of fiber. So that's why we recommend a slow transition. Don't go from having no fiber to having 40 grams of fiber. But if you are someone that has loose stools or some sort of digestive issues, definitely check your fiber. If you're not sure what foods contain fiber, reach out to your coach. LadyTheFUp has a whole webpage dedicated to fiber. What else? Okay, so the purpose of carbohydrates in the body is to give us energy. So when we are not in ketosis, when we're eating a ton of carbs, your coach has you at like 120, 150, 200, 300, sometimes 350 grams of carbs, your muscles are full. And they are full of something called glycogen. So when carbohydrates, whether they're complex or simple, get ingested into the body converts it to glucose, which is the simplest form of sugar. You probably have heard that diabetes people test their blood glucose, which is their blood sugar levels. So with all of that, there is blood sugar and glucose circulating inside you in your bloodstream, specifically after a meal. But there also needs to be a way to store that into the muscle. And that's where insulin comes in. I'm not going to get into insulin this week. I'm actually going to pull in Deb in a future week. And we're going to talk all about insulin and insulin resistance and blood sugar. All that fun stuff is going to be an episode of its own. But your muscles are filled essentially with glycogen, which is stored glucose. Carbohydrates are then they're converted into the glucose that stays in your muscles. So the more carbohydrates you have, the more energy stores that you have as well. But it gets to a certain point where after you tip over into a calorie surplus, now your body doesn't need all of those carbohydrates. And that's when your body can convert it to fat to store to use later. So it doesn't matter if you're in a surplus from fats. It doesn't matter if you're in a surplus from carbs. If you are in a calorie surplus, meaning you are burning more than you are you're consuming more than you are burning, your body's going to put on fat. So with the energy and the stored glucose, that gets converted into ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. Again, not something that you really need to know, but adenosine triphosphate is responsible for every reaction that I am doing, the words coming out of my mouth, the thoughts that I am thinking, me moving my hands, all of this requires ATP. So if you've ever been on low carbs before, it's totally normal to be low energy because your body doesn't have the typical fuel source that it does to keep us super energetic and moving. This is also why you'll see, or sometimes your coach will tell you, you look full or you look flat. So that is referring to the amount of glycogen and glucose that are stored in your muscles. The higher your carbohydrates are, the more full you're going to look. If we've taken away your carbohydrates, example, put you into temporary ketosis, you're going to look flat because your muscle gas tanks, the stuff I talked about last week that are normally this full, are like dead empty. They are not full. They lose a lot of their volume because without the glucose, you're also not storing as much water, so you look flatter. But that's where carbing up or the peak process or refeeds or the reverse diet come in to add carbohydrates back into the diet so that your muscles are fuller and you have more energy. Therefore, you can output more, you can work harder. Your non-energy activity thermogenesis, that NEAT, also increases in the day because you have more energy. You're now all of a sudden you're fidgeting at work, or you're sitting on the couch and like you're playing with your fingers instead of laying there being like, I'm a tired potato because I don't have carbs. So carbs, energy, protein, growth, repair, cells, mood. Moving on to fats. So fats are the more calorie dense macronutrients. So this is where we have 9 calories per gram instead of the 4 for protein and carbs. And fats have been given a really, really bad rap. It originally started back, I think in like the 80s or the 90s, created by the sugar industry to say fats are bad, carbs and sugar are better for you. That is not necessarily the case, especially when it comes to healthy fats. So all women, in order to keep a healthy reproductive cycle and healthy hormones, need to consume a sufficient amount of fat. As a general guideline, general, doesn't apply to all of you, minimum of about 40 grams of fat, ideally 45, 50 grams, is a sufficient amount every day. The higher we push our fats when we're in a surplus, or if we're looking to build muscle, it is going to increase, but like you're never, well, not never, but it's going to be a very, very rare occasion if someone's eating over like 100, 150 grams of fat because they are so calorie dense. And we would rather give you more carbohydrates so you have the energy to train harder. So fats are very, very important for nutrient absorption for 4 vitamins. So we have vitamin K, which is also known as potassium, vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin E. So all of these are things that we essentially need. Our body cannot make them. We have to get them from the foods, just like the essential amino acids. So those 4 vitamins need fat to be absorbed and utilized in the body. If you do not have fat, you're not going to be able to unfold and transport those nutrients to where they need to be in the body sufficiently, and then you're going to feel a little bit tired. So if any of you out there are taking a vitamin D supplement and an omega-3 supplement, I recommend that you pair them together at the same time for the most effective use. Or there's a lot of omega-3s that if you look at it, they actually have some vitamin D in it for that benefit. So just like protein being broken down into amino acids, fats get broken down into fatty acids. And there are essential fatty acids that we cannot make and we need to get from food. So the main ones are EPA and DHA. And these come from your omega-3s predominantly, but your body can also make them from omega-6s and omega-9s. But it's a much more complex internal process to turn the 6s and 9s into EPA and DHA rather than going straight for the omega-3s. So if you're someone who loves fish or walnuts, or just Google what foods are high in omega-3s, if you can incorporate them into your diet naturally, amazing. I highly recommend that you do. I am personally someone who reacts to walnuts and I just don't like fish. So I take an omega-3 supplement. I do make sure that my omega-3 supplement is NSF for sport certified. If you're taking a fish oil, you really want to make sure that the fish oil is not high in mercury, not high in toxins, not high in heavy metals. So the NSF for sport certification on it is a third party that tests to make sure that there are no heavy metals in it. Or you can do your research for whatever type of omega-3 supplement you want to consume. There are also vegan omega-3 supplements out there for those of you that are like, I want to save the fishies, or whatever environmental or ethical reasons you have. I respect that. But I personally take an omega-3 to make sure that I am up to date and I'm getting my essential fatty acids every single day so that I can perform cognitively. So these essential fatty acids are important for wound healing. So if you bruise yourself, cut yourself, have a surgery, have an injury, they're also incredibly helpful in decreasing inflammation. So those are our good essential fats. But we also have the not so great fats. The most important one that I'm sure we've all heard of is trans fats. So here in Canada, everything has to be trans fat free. There's a lot of states in America that are also trans fat free. However, the government and the nutritional regulations, trans fat free does not mean trans fat free. It just means per serving, you need to have a certain amount or less. So it can have 0.5 grams of trans fat per 16th of the package, and these companies are still allowed to promote that it is trans fat free, even though it's not. And on the nutritional label, you will see 0 trans fats. So there's one word that you can look for when you're reading ingredients in something that pops out. And if you read this, it means there are trans fats, and that is the word hydrogenated. So if it's hydrogenated palm oil, hydrogenated soybean oil, whatever type of hydrogenated thing that it is, that is a sign that it does contain trans fats. I've heard that nutrition from supplements does not get used by our body. That is incorrect. Depending on what supplement, I don't want to get into that question right now, Amira, but if you want to have a conversation with either Deb or myself separately, we can get into the specific questions that you have. Supplementation, we never want to use it as our first source. If we can get something through food, that's great. But a lot of times, especially now with agro-business and companies are pumping out produce, our soil quality is degrading a lot. And all of the natural vitamins and minerals that were once in the soil that our plants that we would consume uptake and then we eat are no longer in that soil. So supplementing is one way to get around that. I personally take a couple of supplements for standard nutritional deficiencies. I take a vitamin D, I take an omega-3, I take magnesium, and I do consume a psyllium husk fiber supplement just because most days my fiber is not at that 25 grams. It's normally like 19, 21-ish grams. So I like to add a little bit more just to ensure that I'm hitting my minimum fiber in a day. Supplements is a very, very, very broad term, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of all the different types. But if you guys have any specific questions on supplements, we can totally do a future episode on that. So, another thing that you can do regarding supplements and which ones you should take is visit your physician and ask for some blood work. Be like, hey, I just want to check all of my nutrient levels. I know here in Ontario, so if you're like Toronto or Ontario, omega-3 and vitamin D are not covered by Canadian healthcare. So you would have to purchase that test off of Life Labs, go to your doctor with it purchased and printed and be like, here, please sign this, and then go to Life Labs. But in most of my experience with physicians, if you say, I want to know my vitamin D levels, they're like, it's low, you're Canadian, we barely get any sun, take a vitamin D supplement, which isn't the best. I see that as kind of like a lazy practitioner. But definitely in the winter, if you're Canadian and you don't get outside, vitamin D is one that I would highly recommend. So what else do I have on here? I want to talk a little bit about what a calorie is, because people think that like you can hold it and it's like, oh, look, there's a calorie. I just burned one and now it's gone because there was calories in my fat. And while that's kind of true, a calorie is actually a unit of measurement, like inches or pounds. And with a calorie, it is the amount of energy it takes to increase the temperature of water by 1 degree Celsius. So I'll repeat that again. A calorie is a unit of measurement, like pounds or inches or centimeters or whatever type of measurement that is required for energy to increase the temperature of water by 1 degree Celsius. So when we are burning calories, what's happening in our body is we are using the existing adenosine triphosphate. We're using the existing ATP. So if there's carbohydrates in our muscles, our body is using that, breaking it down, turning it into fuel, using it for cardio, for resistance training, for me talking with my hands, for you playing with your kids, making dinner, anything like that would require ATP. And when our ATP production starts to decrease, or we immediately run out of our stored fuel, or we use some of our fuel sources, our body then needs to create new ATP for that. And the process of ATP and creating that energy is what burns the calories. When we create energy, heat is made as a byproduct. That's just kind of a lesson in science where energy produces heat. So when we are creating this energy, it releases heat. And the heat, if you keep in mind, the calories is your body, or is water increasing 1 degree Celsius. So when we're producing heat, that's where the calories come in. You don't really have to worry about it too much, the science about it. If you have any sort of fitness tracker like a Whoop or a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, those are good guesstimates about how many calories you're burning, but it's never going to be 100% accurate. You need to be hooked up to like a science lab where they have a whole bunch of things stuck on you and they're monitoring things very, very regularly to get a very specific calorie burn that's accurate. But as a general, I'm looking to improve my overall well-being. I'm interested in seeing how many calories I burn in a day. Any fitness tracker is better than nothing, in my opinion. I pay for it at the lab with the referral paper. Okay, yeah. So if you are going into a Life Labs, you can also pay for it at the lab. I've personally just paid for mine online and then saw my doctor. But everyone is different, and you can reach out to your physician to see. Let me check Facebook for any questions. That's about the end of my talk for today, guys. I know we're coming up on 45 minutes. So if you have any questions, speak now or forever hold your peace until next week or the week after. Next week, we are going to be covering more resistance training. So if you haven't watched part 1 that we did last week, please, please, please check that out. This is going to be building on top of that. And that's what a lot of the series is going to be. So if you haven't checked that out and you need the replay link, if you're watching the Facebook video, I'm going to comment below with the replay link. If you're watching the Crowdcast, I'm going to comment below with the replay link for last week. Next week, we are going to get into how to take your sets to failure with different tempos and different approaches. We're going to get into a little bit of lat and back anatomy, and then maybe some quads and hamstrings as well. All right. There's an ask a question. Thank you, Rolla. Let me have a look here. What about ketone drinks? I am not experienced enough in the world of ketones to be able to comment on ketone drinks, but let me look into it this next week and a bit. And the next time we do a nutrition one, Jane, I will get back to you. Christine, you asked carbs. What is your strategy for carbs in the following phases? Build, recomp, fat loss, and reverse. Ooh, really good question. Okay. So when we are building, we want to make sure that your body has sufficient carbohydrates to keep those muscle glycogen stores filled so that every time you train, you can one-up yourself. You can be a little bit better and force your body to change. With building, typically we want to put you in a bit of a surplus. So in order to optimally build, where we are just focused on muscle growth, we're not focused so much on fat loss. Maybe we're okay with putting a little bit of fat on. That's where your carbs would be fairly high compared to what they normally are, so that you have the energy to push in your training and recover as well. So anywhere from like 140 up to 350 grams of carbs is what I've seen our LadyTheFUp clients have in a build phase. With a recomps is where your carbs are going to be altered with your protein so that we can kind of push and pull. With a recomp, we want to stay around your maintenance calories. So we're not in a deficit, we're not in a surplus, we're not focusing on losing fat as our main goal. So we're not in a deficit. With a recomp, again, we want to make sure that your carbohydrates are sufficient, that you have the energy to push hard in your training, but not so much that it puts you in that calorie surplus where you're going to add on fat. This is where, we can increase your carbs and we can add a little bit of cardio, or we can pull back on the cardio, which is burning calories, and keep your carbs at a little bit of a lower level. If you're super, super full all the time and you're doing a ton of cardio, maybe we'd pull back on the cardio so that we can lower your carbs and you're not force feeding yourself. But a lot of times people will find that if they stick with the carbs that their coach has given them for a couple of weeks, their metabolism starts to pick up and they actually get hungry. And me as a coach, I am always super excited when my clients say they are hungry when they're eating a sufficient amount of food. Yes, you're going to be hungry when you're in a deficit. But if you're in a building phase or a recomp phase and you say, hey, I'm hungry, that's a sign that you're doing a really good job. Your body can tolerate more carbs. So use that as a motivation to push harder in your training so you can eat more food. In terms of fat loss, so this is where we are going to take away some of your carbs and force your body to get more of its energy from fat. So this is where your body's like, hey, we don't have enough to do our 45 minutes of cardio and our resistance training 5 to 6 days a week, sometimes 7 for some of you. Now we need to really start burning fat for fuel. If you are not in a calorie surplus, if you are in this fat loss phase, I highly recommend that your carbohydrates are consumed. You have at least 20 grams pre-training or pre-cardio, and then like 10 to 20 grams post-training as well to help refill those muscle glycogen stores. Meal timing, macro timing does not matter if you're just getting into it, but if you really want to optimize your performance and your physique, carbohydrates before you train, somewhere like anywhere between an hour and 10 minutes beforehand. And then after training, if your carbs are super high, you can also have them intro workout. But again, not something that we need to worry about too much. So as we're dieting you down in a fat loss phase, your carbs are going to go lower and lower and lower and lower. Your fats are probably going to drop as well. Your protein will very likely hover around the same spot. Maybe it'll go down like 10 or 15 grams total. But as we decrease, your carbs are going to go down. There gets to a point where your body's like, we do not have sufficient food anymore. We think we're starving. We're going to hold on to all of our body fat and just spin our wheels here. You can run all you want. You can resistance train all you want, but we're going to hold on to our fat because we think we're starving and we don't want to die. So this is where the reverse diet or refeeds come in. But touching on the reverse diet is adding carbohydrates back into your diet so that all of those regulations that were down regulated. So in your body, the fidgeting, the having energy, the mood, that's going to decrease as your carbs decrease. And when you increase them slowly, we're kind of like edging your metabolism to speed back up. So when you go into a dieting phase, if you start your fat loss phase and you're burning like 1,900 calories a day, doing the same training, the same cardio, but if we decrease your food, keep everything else the same, your body is going to burn less calories per day because it always wants to find the balance of calories in, calories out. So now we're at the bottom. Your body's like, nope, we are stubborn. We're not going to let go anymore. And this is where a lot of you might be like, aha, that was me. I was eating 1,200 calories a day for years and years and years, and I saw no progress. And that's because your body was so stressed and it was in like a protective survival mode. So as we increase the carbohydrates back, your metabolism starts to upregulate, you have more energy, and your body will actually start to tighten up to a certain extent. We need to find that maintenance surplus threshold, but as we get you from a bigger deficit to less of a deficit, Your muscles are going to fill out again. That gas tank is going to refill. Your glycogen stores are going to be full. You're going to be stronger in the gym. And you won't need to do as much cardio because your general metabolic rate, which decreased, is increasing again. So doesn't apply to everyone, but it is that game of push and pull. And this is where your coach comes in, and those weekly check-ins and the biofeedback that you give us. How is your sleep? How is your energy? How is your mood? Those things are really, really important to us to make changes to the following week. It's not about your weight. Yes, it's a little bit about how you look as well. We want to make sure that we're seeing the progress that we want. We're not regressing, but that biofeedback that you give us is so important. You mentioned timing for protein consumption for muscle building. Oh yeah, sorry, that's what I completely forgot about. So for optimal protein timing, you want to have 20 to 40 grams with sufficient essential amino acids every 3 to 4 hours. So we want to consume 20 to 40 grams. I would say if you're calculating this in your macros, somewhere between 25 and like 35 grams is a really good amount to have every 3 to 4 hours. When we ingest protein, that flips on the muscle protein synthesis switch. And for about 3 to 4 hours, that switch is turned on. The amino acids are doing its thing. Your body is building, and then the switch is going to kind of turn off. So that's when you need to introduce another 20 to 40 grams of protein to turn it back on. I personally like when I wake up in the morning, I will have just a shake with sufficient protein to make sure I'm getting I have collagens, 20 grams of protein in the morning. So 20 grams there. And then I'll go through until about lunch-ish. That's when I'll have my first meal with meat, have my 20 to 40 grams. And then I'll go through my workday. Pre-workout, I will also have 20 to 40 grams of protein. I'll work out. I'll come back, have 20 to 40 grams of protein. And then I always make sure that about an hour before bed, I'm also consuming 20 to 40 grams of protein so that muscle protein synthesis continues into sleep. That's one of the biggest windows when we are sleeping. Human growth hormone, so it's naturally produced in your body. When you resistance train, it goes up by 300 to 400% when you're sleeping. So having that growth hormone release when you're sleeping and the muscle protein synthesis at the same time is going to be so beneficial for your muscle mass. So again, it's not you need to do this, but if you want to optimize 20 to 40 grams of protein every 3 to 4 hours. I saw another question come in, I think. Oh, it was on the chat. Can you please repeat what you said about the reverse diet and how your body might look tighter but not need to do so much cardio? I'm going to get into the reverse diet in a full episode in the future. You can revisit the replay as soon as this is over because now we are getting closer to the hour. I will touch on reverse diets. It will be a whole session of itself. That'll probably be in August because I have the next couple of weeks planned. Can we touch on intermittent fasting? Absolutely. Intermittent fasting it's good for digestive health if you're having digestive issues. In terms of muscle building, not so great because of that 20 to 40 gram protein window that we want every 3 to 4 hours. So if you're only eating for 6 hours a day, you're holding your body from turning on that muscle protein synthesis. But yes, definitely something we can cover in a future session. Just going to pop over to Facebook and make sure that they don't have any questions. And then I think we're going to wrap it up here, guys. Yep. Awesome. Okay. Well, that is it for this week. IBS will be in the digestive health. Maybe not next time, but definitely a future session. Keep the topics coming because I only have like 6 weeks planned right now. So anything that you guys want me to cover, send me a DM, comment here, send me an email, whatever it is. I'm here to help. Thank you for spending an hour of your evening with me. I hope to see you guys back next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, resistance training. If you haven't checked out the replay, the link will be in the comments wherever you are seeing this. And I'll see y'all next week.